I'll start working with the new version of Ionic. So I'll start with Ionic start infinite scroll using the blank one, and then we can wait for the Ionic to create the project. But during that time, I will explain about the server side. That is, here I provide you the link to this Colab. This is a simple Flask example. This one is quite simple. This is the Flask that return the ID and the score of the student. The score is just like randomly generated for each ID, and for the ones in the in this API, the directory is quite simple. Get, the directory is get, and the parameter is ID. So once you run it, you can see here it will return. For example, this one, it will return 20 students. If you start with ID number 0, it will start from this one. The list is from data 0 to 19. If you start from 20, it will start from ID 20 to 39. So in each call, it will return 20 student scores, and it will return in the key of data. So the value is a list. Okay, so that's all for the simple Flask example. I provide you the link to this collab also in the description, so you can look for the description. It's already finished. I won't create the Ionic free account. And then once you finish, you can go to the infinite scroll directory, and then you have to create the service provider, the data provider. So I will using Ionic generate service data provider. Okay, so it will create the data provider. Once you finish, you can run the Visual Studio Code to this directory. So this one is the simplest one, right? And you can use the Ionic serve. I'll use the lab. So we can wait for Ionic to start, and of course you can go to the home.page.html and change this one to infinite scroll. Okay, so I'll change it to infinite scroll, and the lab, yes, I think it's finished. So I will start localhost. Okay, it's run already. Oh, for the lab it doesn't work. It's no worry. I can use this one. You can use the more tools and the developer tools in Chrome to see the result of your program. Okay, so that's all. So I think we finished working with the environment already. So we start with the infinite scroll here, and this time I will use the console to show something. So we can start with home.page.typescript, and in the constructor we leave it here, nothing to do, and we have the ion view did enter. This is the life cycle of your page. Once it enter your page, it will call this event ion view did enter. So I will use console.log start ion will did enter, and here this is the result. Once you save it, can you see we have the word ion view did enter here? So nothing show on your program, but it show in the console. Okay, so it means that now we have the ion view did enter, so we can trace something in your program already. Now we go back to the provider service, and we will do it the same way. But before we can do it, in this constructor, you have to include that one. So it is the you have to import your data provider service, and can you see this one automatically added for you, data provider service. Okay, so I call it the using the private one, my provider. The data type is data provider service. So that's all. Once you save it and everything's still fine, that means your program is okay. So it means that in this constructor, it will create one my provider. So now you can go to your provider, and in your constructor here, just console.log and create the data provider here. So you can see that once it is created, can you see? The step is like this is a constructor, so it will create the provider first. So in your provider, once it's created, it will log in the console that create the service provider. And once you create in the constructor, in your ion view did enter, you can see that we have the console.log. So it means that now start ion view did enter already. Okay, that's all for our starting point. Now we will work with the data that we get from the Colab one from Flask. So I will create the method that like try to show you how can we get the data. Um, at first, in your data provider, in the constructor, I will create the HTTP client one. That is the HTTP client. So you can see that we have to import this one. So it's easy that you have to import the HTTP client here from the Angular common and HTTP. So now we have HTTP client already. Okay, and then now we have, oh, can you see on the left side, it is the like the data provider service, and it has some error, right? So I hope that you can still remember that we have to add something in our app.modules, that you have to add the HTTP here. So you have to add a moment. You have to add, go to your app.module.typescript and then add the HTTP client to your imports. So this one, you have to add the HTTP client module into the imports, and then you see that the error on the left side disappeared. And don't your editor, in this case our Visual Studio Code, already add HTTP client module for me already, so no need to do the import. Okay, so that's one is finished for the app.modules.typescript. So we can close that one, and then we go back to the data service provider. Here we will get the data from our Flask. So let's try to do something with me. In our sorry, in I don't know why it's up here. So okay, uh, this dot we have the HTTP one, right? So we use HTTP dot get, and then you have to provide the URL to your service. Okay, so we start with ID to be 0. Okay, this one, this dot http dot get this URL, and then once you have this data, you can try to see the result console.log this data, what you can get from this statement. So you can see we have an observable one that has a lot of things, the operator, the source. So because it is observable, so we can do something else. This one I log the value that returned from this http.get. So because this is observable, now it's time for us to map this data into something else. So we have to import the map. We will map this data. So from the RxJS and using the operators, that's all. So once you import this one, just save, and you should see like everything seems good. So from this part, after you get this, you have to subscribe to the observable one, and you have to subscribe and set the data that return from outside, or you can use return or some other variable, and you have to map this one, and then I will use the new line console.log data. Okay, and close this line with the semicolon. Okay, so this means that, okay, once you get the data, just log into your console. So I'll save it, and you can see on the left side, your data has some meaning inside, not observable anymore. So you can see that your data is an array in this case. Okay, so now we will work with an array. So I will add more statements. So you can add a block, use a block instead of single statement like we did before. Okay, so now we have the data already. So I will use the for loop, for, and then inside the for, I let I is 0, I is less than data, and in our data you can see that we have the key of data, right? So this is the array, a list that return from outside. So I will use data, and this one, this term data is this key. Okay, so I use data as data.length and I plus plus, and inside the for loop I will use console.log data and data of I. So you can see now we can iterate and show all elements in the loop. So this one is our program is look good now. It looks good. So you can see both ID and score. Okay. So this one is the constructor. So we can work with the data that come from outside. And this time we will pass the in my case, I would like to pass an argument from outside that try to push this data into a list. So I will start with the list. So this time I will use uh, a new variable here that will be the item list data will be a list. So I will use item list data that will be a list. Okay, so this one is the variable item list data. Okay, and I will change this constructor to a new method called get data, and this time I will get the ID from outside, and then I will move this line. I will move this line to this method. Okay, for the get data one, and this time because we already have the ID, so I will add the ID to our URL, and this one everything will be same as the previous one. So now we can call this get data. So in our home.page.typescript, this time Ion View did enter. I use the get data. This dot my provider dot get data, because get data is in our data service provider, right? And you have to send the ID to this method. So once you call this one, look at this. So everything's still fine. It's called the get data in the provider, and it print everything to the screen. That's all. So our get data work well, but this time I will send the item list data as one parameter. Okay, so you can see that it's caused an error because our get data get only one parameter, right? So in our get data, I have to add the new parameters here. For example, you can use item list to be the name of the variable. So once you add it, everything still come back. Okay, and in the loop, I will use item list dot push data of data I. So I push in this loop. I not other than print it to the console, I push it to the item list also. So once we call this one here, our item list data should have the data. So now it's time to show your data on your HTML. So I will remove this one, and I will use the ion card to show the data using an Angular 4 to be let item of. We have the variable name that item list data in our TypeScript. So this one is in the ion card. So I will show just the item first. So you can see that it is an object, right? So in each item, I will show the ID instead of the item. So you can see that our data is here is correct. Okay, I can use the bold type. Oh, instead of this, I will use the ID, the bold type, item dot ID and break, and then score, item dot score. That's all, I think. Okay, so now your data is like this. Okay, so it's work now. You can get the data. Okay, so now it's time to add the infinite scroll. You can go to ionic framework to get the help from your infinite scroll. So you can use the you can copy this infinite scroll and put it in here after your card. After your card, you can push the ion infinite, and the built-in one is load data and send the event, and the spinner is bubble and load more data. Let's take a look at the result of this. So once you add the infinite scroll to your project, you can see that, okay, so it's like load the new data, right? So this one, it will load the new data and has, because you add the load data but you didn't implement it yet, so your load data is not a function. The error is here, so you have to add your load data into your home.page.typescript. So once you go to your home.page.typescript, now it's like you have to add your function load data, and you must get one parameter, that is the event. Okay, that's all. This is the function. So you can, in the load data, in this time, you load the first page. You already loaded the first page once you use the did enter one, right? But in the infinite scroll, you have to, like, you must have like another page or use the next ID. So I will use the page number to be 0, like to trace how many data that you already loaded. So the first one, page number, is the 01, right? So once it scroll to the infinite scroll, you have to add the page number. So I will use page number plus plus, and then this dot, I will use my provider dot get data, and this time I will use this dot page number. But we will start with the next ID, right? In this case, our data return 20 IDs per API, one API call, right? So I will call ID.page number times 20, and I will send this dot item list data. But this time you have to add the event, because we will use later. So I will use this one, have no event, right? So I will add now. So you can see that we have an error again, but no worry, because we add the new parameters to your get data. So this one will be the event. Save it, and that's all. So you can see that this is the event. So you can see we can load to the next page, but it's still like load data here. This is the infinite scroll is triggered once, but for the next one, it's still like not complete yet. So So once you get the data, you have to use the event.target.complete to make it like to force it to complete. So in the case that you get the data, but you know that if the ID is not equal to 0, if it's not equal to 0, it means that it is called from the infinite scroll, not called from the ion view did enter, right? Because in ion view did enter, you just send the first ID that is 0. So if it's not 0, it means that it's called from the infinite scroll. So if it's not, once you finish, you can use event.target.complete to force that your infinite scroll to complete it. So now, once you finish adding it, the line event.target.complete, now your program is ready. So on the left side, can you see I lock everything to the right and show everything in our URL. So you can see that our program is now is work well with the infinite scroll. So guys, in this video clip, so I hope that you will enjoy with this one. You can use the get and process the data and send the data through your uh, item list and show it into your HTML using the infinite scroll. So that's all. I hope you like it.